The cold beep of the card reader echoed through the crowded Target aisle, sharp and final. The cashier stopped tapping the screen. She looked up, her smile dropping into a polite, practiced grimace. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It says your card was declined." Heat flushed under Sarah's skin. Behind her, a shopping cart will squeaked as a man shifted his weight. A woman 2 spots back let out a long, heavy exhale. Sarah tried again. She pressed her card against the black terminal. Another beep. Red text flashed on the screen. Declined. $4.15. A loaf of sandwich bread and a cartoon-printed carton of organic milk for her daughter, Lily. That was all. Sarah reached into her leather tote bag. Her fingers brushed past receipt paper and plastic pens, finding her small zip pouch. She pulled out a crisp $20 bill, slid it across the counter, took her change, and picked up the paper bag. Before the dust settled on that moment at the register, Sarah had no idea that her quiet life was about to split wide open. Outside, the crisp Ohio spring air hit her face with the scent of wet asphalt and fresh morning rain. The traffic on High Street rolled by in a low, continuous hum. Sarah walked to her gray sedan, set the brown paper bag on the passenger seat, and turned the ignition. The engine purred. She rested her hands on the steering wheel, watching the windshield wipers sweep away a thin film of pollen. She pulled out her phone and dialed Mark's number. He picked up on the third ring. "Sarah, I'm in a meeting in 10 minutes. "Mark, my card was declined at Target," Sarah said, keeping her voice level. "The main debit card." There was a short pause on the line. Then came the sound of a rustling paper, followed by a slow, heavy breath. "Oh, yeah, I canceled that card this morning." Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter. The leather felt cold against her palm. "You canceled it? Why?" "Sarah, look at our statement," Mark said. His tone was smooth, flat, and completely devoid of emotion. It was the tone he used at the dealership when explaining financing options to hesitant buyers. "You've been spending without tracking. I set up a family budget app on your phone. You have a $300 monthly allowance now. It's just easier if I manage the primary accounts from my phone." "An allowance?" Sarah repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. "Mark, I manage the household bills. I've managed them for 6 years." Before Mark could answer, another voice cut in over the Bluetooth speaker in his car. It was high, sharp, and unmistakably close to the receiver. "Eleanor, her mother-in-law. She doesn't bring any income into that house anyway, Mark," Eleanor said loudly, not bothering to lower her voice. "If she isn't working a real job, she doesn't need open access to your hard-earned credit lines. 300 is more than generous." A heavy silence filled the car. The smell of the warm organic milk and fresh bread drifted up from the paper bag next to her. Sarah closed her eyes for a brief second. 6 years ago, she had walked away from her desk at a mid-sized accounting firm in downtown Columbus. She had left behind a steady salary, a rising title, and financial independence to stay home, manage their household, and give Mark the freedom to push for his promotion to general sales manager. She had traded her spreadsheets for laundry baskets, budget planning for meal prep, and professional status for a quiet, invisible role behind Mark's rising career. Now, sitting in the quiet cabin of her car, she realized that her years of sacrifice had not built equity in her marriage. It had simply erased her. She wasn't a partner anymore. She was an expense that needed to be managed. Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. Anger would only give them ammunition to call her emotional. "I understand," Sarah said softly into the microphone. "Thank you for letting me know." She ended the call before Mark could reply. The silence inside the car returned, heavy and suffocating. Sarah leaned forward, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out a small black spiral notebook, and a plain ballpoint pen. She clicked the top. Her hand was steady. On the very first page, right under the morning date, she wrote in neat, precise block letters. Tuesday, 8:15 a.m. Main card canceled without consent. $300 allowance imposed. She closed the notebook, set it on the passenger seat beside the milk, and shifted the car into drive. The battle had begun, and Sarah was no longer playing the victim. Sarah did not drive home. She turned onto Broad Street, heading straight for the Chase Bank branch in downtown Columbus. The glass doors parted with a quiet hiss. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and fresh ink. Susan Reynolds, the senior branch manager who had handled Sarah and Mark's accounts for 5 years, looked up from her desk. Her face softened into a warm smile. "Good morning, Sarah. How can I help you today?" "Good morning, Susan," Sarah said, her voice steady. "My debit card was declined an hour ago. I need to check my account status." Susan's smile faltered slightly at the tone in Sarah's voice. "Of course. Let's step into my office." The heavy oak door closed behind them, shutting out the muted hum of the bank floor. Susan pulled up the master file on her dual monitors. Her fingers clacked against the mechanical keyboard. Then, her typing slowed. Her eyes moved back and forth across the blue screen. "Sarah," Susan said carefully, turning her monitor toward the desk. "I see several administrative changes made to your primary checking and joint savings accounts." Sarah leaned forward. "What kind of changes?" "Yesterday afternoon, the primary email address was updated to Mark's work account," Susan explained, pointing a silver pen at the screen. "The phone number for security alerts was changed to his cell, and the mailing address for physical card replacements was updated to his office on Dublin Road." Sarah stared at the glowing text. A cold knot formed in her stomach. "When was this done?" "At 4:15 p.m. yesterday," Susan replied, "through the online administrative portal." "I didn't authorize any of this," Sarah said. Susan folded her hands on her desk. Her expression was solemn. "Sarah, Mark submitted a signed document 8 months ago, a durable power of attorney. It grants him full administrative authority to manage, modify, and restructure your shared financial accounts without secondary approval." The room seemed to shrink. Sarah remembered that evening 8 months ago. Mark had brought home a thick stack of papers after dinner, tossing them onto the kitchen island while she was wiping down the counters. "Just tax exemption forms for the dealership's family discount plan," he had said casually, handing her a blue pen. She had trusted him. She had signed the bottom line without reading the fine print. Her own signature was now the lock on her cage. "Because the POA is legally binding and on file," Susan added softly, "the bank had to process his requests. Technically, no laws were broken here." "I understand," Sarah said quietly. "Thank you, Susan." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat in the wood-paneled office of David Vance, a veteran family and estate attorney who had been a close friend of her late father. The room smelled of old paper, leather-bound books, and dark roast coffee. David adjusted his reading glasses as he scanned the copy of the POA Sarah had requested from the bank. "Mark was thorough," David said, his deep voice filling the quiet office. He tapped a specific paragraph near the bottom of page 3. "Look here, Sarah." Sarah leaned over the desk. The legal jargon was dense, but David pointed to a highlighted clause. "This clause grants him total control over real estate assets and personal trusts," David explained. "However, there is a trigger condition. He can only execute a full transfer of your joint property, including your home, or place you in a long-term care facility if there is a documented medical evaluation stating you suffer from severe cognitive impairment or psychological instability." Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. "He needs a doctor's note to take the house." "Exactly," David said. "Without a diagnosis of incompetence or severe depression, This POA cannot touch your real estate holdings. But if he gets one, David let the sentence hang in the air. Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. A text message from Chloe popped up on the screen. Sarah, call me now. I just heard something crazy from my cousin at the clinic. Sarah hit the call button immediately and put it on speaker. Chloe's sharp, frantic voice filled the room. Sarah, my cousin works at Dr. Harrison's private psychiatric clinic on Riverside Drive. Eleanor called them 2 hours ago. She booked an in-home psychological evaluation for you this Saturday morning. She told them you've been showing signs of severe postpartum depression and memory loss since last year. Sarah's grip tightened around her phone until her knuckles turned white. They weren't just taking her money. They were building a medical paper trail to declare her unfit, strip her of her home, and take Lily. David Vance looked across the desk at Sarah. His eyes were cold and focused. They are setting a trap, Sarah. The evaluation is 4 days away. The rain began to lash against the tall office windows, dark and heavy. Sarah stared at the raindrops streaking down the glass. The panic that had gripped her chest in the bank was gone, replaced by a sharp, icy clarity. Sarah picked up her pen. She opened her black spiral notebook to page 2 and wrote the time, 10:45 a.m., Saturday evaluation booked at Dr. Harrison's clinic. She closed the notebook, looked up at David, and said, "Then we have 4 days to make sure their trap springs on them." The front door closed with a soft click as Mark and Eleanor walked into the foyer at 7 o'clock. The aroma of roasted chicken, garlic, and rosemary drifted from the kitchen. Eleanor dropped a white paper envelope onto the polished dining table. It landed next to Sarah's placemat with a crisp thud. "That's $300 in cash," Eleanor said, pulling off her beige leather gloves. "That is your personal allowance for the month. Anything else you need for the house, you write down an itemized receipt and hand it to Mark for approval." Mark stood beside his mother, unbuttoning his navy suit jacket. He did not look Sarah in the eye. "It's for the best, Sarah. It keeps our accounting clean." Sarah looked at the green bills sitting on the dark wood. In the past, her throat would have tightened. Tears would have stung her eyes. But tonight, she felt nothing but a quiet, cool distance. She reached out, picked up the envelope, and slid it into her pocket. A polite, serene smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Eleanor," Sarah said softly. "Thank you, Mark. I'll make sure to track every penny." Mark blinked, surprised by her calm reaction. Eleanor narrowed her eyes, searching Sarah's face for anger or defeat, but found only smooth composure. That night, the house grew silent at midnight. Mark's steady, heavy breathing filled the master bedroom. Sarah quietly slipped out from under the covers. She wore a dark gray fleece sweater and soft cotton pants. She picked up her laptop, her black notebook, and stepped barefoot down the carpeted stairs into the dark kitchen. She sat at the small breakfast nook in the corner, away from the windows. She opened her laptop. The screen cast a cool blue glow across her face. Using a secure link provided by Chloe, Sarah logged into her new, independent account portal. She opened a secondary browser window and accessed freelance bookkeeping projects. Her fingers moved swiftly over the keys. The quiet clack, clack, clack echoed like steady clockwork in the dark room. She reviewed balance sheets, reconciled quarterly tax ledgers, and audited accounts receivable for 3 local small businesses. She was no longer just a housewife waiting for an allowance. She was a trained financial analyst reclaiming her craft. By 3 a.m., a confirmation email popped up on her screen. A client had approved her audit report. A direct deposit of $1,500 cleared into her newly opened individual checking account at Wells Fargo, an account Mark knew nothing about. She watched the numbers on the screen. $1,500. Her own money, earned by her own mind. She closed the laptop and opened her black notebook. She wrote down the deposit details, then moved to the next page. She spent the next hour working on herself. She did not sit in grief. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., while the street lights were still on, she put on her running shoes and hit the pavement. She felt the cold morning wind bite her cheeks. She felt her lungs expand, filling with sharp, clean air. Her body grew stronger. Her posture straightened. She drank fresh water, nourished her body, and brushed her hair until it shone under the bathroom lights. She ordered a tailored navy blazer and a sharp white button-down shirt using her new Wells Fargo debit card, having them delivered directly to Chloe's apartment. She was shedding her old skin. She was no longer hiding behind baggy sweaters and silent compliance. On Friday morning at 6 a.m., Sarah drove to the State Mental Health Institute on the south side of the city. The air smelled of rain and pine needles. Inside the quiet clinical office, she met with Dr. Evelyn Carter, a board-certified chief psychiatrist with 30 years of clinical experience. For 3 hours, Sarah underwent a rigorous, standardized cognitive and psychological evaluation. She answered complex logic puzzles, recalled memory sequences, and completed emotional stability assessments. At 9:30 a.m., Dr. Carter signed the official evaluation document, the red ink stamp pressed firmly into the thick paper, cognitive capacity fully intact / emotional stability optimal. Dr. Carter handed the document across the desk. "You are sharper than most executives I evaluate, Mrs. Miller. Whatever someone is trying to build against you, this document destroys it." Sarah took the paper. She felt the smooth texture of the seal beneath her thumb. She walked out of the clinic into the bright morning sunlight. The air felt fresh, crisp, and full of possibility. She opened her car door, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled out her black spiral notebook. She kept the official medical evaluation inside the back cover. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were clear, bright, and fearless. She was no longer reacting. She was executing a plan. She was completely responsible for her own life, her own wealth, and her own daughter's future. She started the engine, shifted into drive, and headed home to face the Saturday appointment. The dining room smelled of roasted beef, heavy red wine, and perfume. Eleanor sat at the head of the mahogany table, her eyes glittering with quiet triumph. Beside her sat Dr. Harrison, a pale man with thin gold-framed spectacles and a leather briefcase resting against his chair. Mark sat across from his mother, staring at his dinner plate, his shoulders slouched. "Dr. Harrison was kind enough to join us for dinner, Sarah," Eleanor said, setting her silver fork down with a sharp clink. "He's an expert in adult cognitive health. Given your recent memory slips and mood swings, Mark, and I felt it was time for an expert evaluation." Dr. Harrison smiled, opening his briefcase to pull out a clipboard with a thick medical intake form. "It's just a routine assessment, Mrs. Miller. A few signature pages, and we can ensure you get the residential care and rest you need." "Rest?" Sarah's voice was cool, smooth, and entirely unbothered. She sat perfectly straight in her seat. "I don't need rest, Eleanor, but your guests might." The heavy oak front door clicked open. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. David Vance stepped into the dining room, his tall frame filling the doorway. Beside him walked Chloe Bennett, carrying a sleek black leather portfolio, accompanied by Marcus Reed, a senior fraud investigator from Chase Bank holding a manila folder. Eleanor snapped her head around, her face turning pale. "What is the meaning of this? Who invited these people into my home?" "I did," Sarah said calmly. She reached into her handbag, pulled out her black, spiral notebook, and set it squarely in the center of the white tablecloth. "It's time for our accounting." Sarah flipped the notebook open to page 1. 8 months ago, Mark had me sign a durable power of attorney under the guise of tax documents, Sarah stated, her voice cutting through the silent room like a blade. 6 months ago, administrative access to our accounts was redirected to Mark's phone. 5 days ago, my primary debit card was canceled without my knowledge, and my monthly allowance was reduced to $300. Sarah, stop this nonsense. Eleanor shouted, standing up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. Mark is the provider. He has every right to manage his money. It isn't his money, Marcus Reed, the fraud investigator, interrupted smoothly. He opened his folder and laid 3 printed bank ledgers on the table. Our forensic audit shows that over the last 90 days, Mark used the POA to withdraw $50,000 from their joint high-yield savings account. That money was transferred directly into an offshore trading account belonging to Eleanor's younger son, Todd. Mark looked up, his jaw dropping. His eyes darted from the bank papers to his mother. What? Todd? Mother? You told me that money was being moved into a high-interest trust for Lily's college fund. Shut up, Mark. Eleanor hissed, her voice cracking. She lied to you, Mark, Sarah said, her tone steady and pitying, just like she lied about Dr. Harrison. Sarah nodded to Chloe. Chloe tapped a button on her tablet. A clear, crisp audio recording filled the dining room. Eleanor's voice echoed loudly from the speaker. Dr. Harrison, if you sign the medical evaluation certifying Sarah is suffering from severe depression and memory loss, I will ensure your private clinic receives a $10,000 donation from my estate. Dr. Harrison's face turned ash-white. He slammed his briefcase shut, grabbed his coat, and bolted out of the dining room without saying another word. The front door slammed behind him. Mark buried his face in his hands, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Mother, how could you? You told me Sarah was sick. You told me we were protecting her. She is a nobody. Eleanor shrieked, pointing a shaking, manicured finger at Sarah. She came into this family with nothing. This house belongs to my son. Everything in it belongs to Mark. You have no power here. Sarah, Mark owns this property. Sarah let out a soft, low chuckle. It was a sound filled with absolute freedom. She reached into her notebook, pulled out a thick document stamped with gold foil, and slid it across the mahogany table until it stopped right in front of Eleanor. Read page 1. Eleanor, Sarah whispered. David Vance stepped forward, clearing his throat. 4 years ago, following her father's passing, Sarah used her full inheritance to purchase 70% of this property. At that time, she established an irrevocable living trust. This house, the land it sits on, and its primary equity are locked entirely inside that trust for Sarah and her daughter, Lily. David leaned over the table, staring directly into Eleanor's wide, terrified eyes. The durable power of attorney Mark tricked her into signing applications only to personal liquid accounts. It has zero legal authority over an irrevocable trust. Mark does not own this house. You do not own this house. Sarah owns this house. The room fell into dead silence. The scent of the cooling roast beef hung heavy and stale in the air. Eleanor sank back into her chair, her body trembling, her eyes hollow. She looked at her son, then at the gold-stamped document, completely broken. Mark slowly slid out of his chair. He dropped to his knees on the hardwood floor beside Sarah, tears streaming down his face. Sarah, please. I didn't know. I was blind. I thought I was protecting our family. Please, give me a chance to fix this. I love you. Sarah looked down at her husband. She looked at his shaking hands, his tear-stained face, and the desperate fear in his eyes. She felt no anger. She felt no desire for revenge. The pain that had burned inside her chest for 6 years was gone, replaced by a quiet, unbreakable strength. She reached into her leather tote bag, pulled out a white paper folder, and placed it gently on the table in front of Mark. "This is a petition for dissolution of marriage," Sarah said softly, her voice calm and firm. "You will pack your bags and leave tonight, Mark. The house stays with Lily and me." "Sarah, please." Mark sobbed. "I am not doing this out of hatred, Mark," Sarah said, her eyes clear and unyielding. "I am doing this because I deserve respect, and my daughter deserves to see her mother stand tall." She stood up, buttoned her sharp navy blazer, and picked up her black spiral notebook. She did not look back as she walked out of the dining room, leaving the broken pieces of her past behind her. The crisp autumn air carried the sharp scent of cedar mulch and fallen oak leaves. In the driveway, a white moving van rumbled quietly as two men loaded the last of Eleanor's antique cabinets. The legal dust settled with quiet precision. Eleanor faced a formal investigation by the State Medical Ethics Board for bribery and attempted healthcare fraud. Her name was quietly stripped from several local charity boards. Mark sat across from Sarah at David Vance's office 3 weeks after the dinner. His face looked gaunt, but his eyes were clear of the anger that used to cloud them. Sarah chose not to file criminal fraud charges against Mark. She did not do it to protect his pride. She did it for Lily. She refused to let her 6-year-old daughter grow up visiting her father behind a glass partition in a county jail. The divorce agreement was firm, fair, and non-negotiable. Sarah retained sole legal and physical custody of Lily. The house remained safely inside the Irrevocable Trust. Mark agreed to a structured court-ordered repayment plan to return every dollar of the $50,000 taken from the savings account. He also signed a mandatory 2-year commitment to weekly individual cognitive therapy. "Thank you, Sarah," Mark had whispered as he signed the final dissolution decree, "for not destroying me." "I am not destroying you, Mark," Sarah replied calmly, her hands resting flat on the mahogany desk. "I am setting a boundary. What you do with your life now is your own responsibility." The separation gave Sarah complete freedom to build her vision. She converted the bright sunroom at the back of the house into her personal office. Sunlight poured through the tall glass panes, illuminating a sleek white desk, 2 potted fiddle leaf figs, and dual high-resolution monitors. Her freelance accounting practice flourished. Within 6 months, she onboarded 12 recurring corporate clients, earning more in a quarter than she used to make in a year at her old firm. Her financial independence was no longer just a shield for herself. She wanted to build a ladder for others. In late September, Sarah partnered with the Columbus Community Library on Main Street. Using a portion of her personal savings, she established the Miller Financial Literacy Initiative. Every Saturday morning, the library's oak-paneled conference room filled with women, young mothers, recent divorcees, and older widows who had been kept in the dark about their family finances. Sarah stood at the head of the room in her tailored cream blazer. She did not lecture. She taught practical, actionable skills. She showed them how to pull their credit reports, how to spot unauthorized bank changes, how to set up independent emergency funds, and how to read the fine print on legal documents. Financial knowledge is not about greed, Sarah told a group of 20 women during a rainy October session. The smell of fresh coffee and old paper filled the room. Financial knowledge is your voice. It is your dignity. Never hand your pen to someone else to write your story. One woman, a mother of 2 who had recently escaped an abusive marriage, stayed behind after class. She gripped Sarah's hand, tears shining in her eyes. "You gave me the courage to look at my own bank account today. I feel like I can breathe again." Sarah smiled, squeezing the woman's hand. "You always had the courage. You just needed the tools." That evening, as the sun dipped low over the Columbus skyline, Sarah returned home. The maple tree in the front yard glowed in vibrant shades of crimson and burnt orange. Leaves skittered across the green grass with a soft, dry rustle. Lily ran across the lawn, her laughter ringing out like small silver bells as she chased a golden retriever puppy they had adopted a month ago. The puppy's wet nose nudged Lily's knee, making her tumble onto the soft grass in pure delight. Sarah stood on the wide wooden porch, leaning against the white railing. She held her black, spiral notebook in her hands. The cover was worn at the edges. She opened to the very first page. She read her own handwriting from 6 months ago. Tuesday, 8:15 a.m. Main card canceled without consent. She picked up a black marker. With one swift, smooth stroke, she drew a bold line straight through that first entry. Then she turned to the final blank page at the back. In neat, elegant cursive, she wrote, "I am the architect of my own life. I am safe. I am free." She closed the notebook with a soft, definitive snap. She walked over to the wooden recycling bin beside the porch steps and dropped the notebook inside. It landed with a quiet thud among the dry paper. She did not feel bitterness toward Mark. She did not feel anger toward Eleanor. Those emotions required energy, and Sarah reserved her energy for growth. The past was no longer a weight around her neck. It was simply the foundation beneath her feet. She walked down the porch steps into the cool autumn air. Lily looked up, her cheeks flushed pink from running, and held out her small hand. "Look, Mommy, a red leaf." Lily squealed, holding up a perfect crimson maple leaf. Sarah knelt in the grass, took the leaf, and held her daughter close. The scent of pine, damp earth, and her daughter's sweet apple shampoo filled her senses. Tragedies did not have the final say in her story. She had rewritten the ending herself. Exactly 365 days had passed since a cold red word flashed across a plastic register screen at Target. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early May. The Columbus sky glowed in shades of warm amber, soft peach, and liquid gold as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The golden hour bathed the brick storefronts along High Street in a quiet, luminous light. Sarah walked down the sidewalk, her heels clicking rhythmically against the concrete. She wore a tailored beige trench coat over a crisp white silk blouse and dark trousers. Her hair caught the late afternoon breeze. Her posture was straight, her shoulders relaxed, and her eyes held a calm, unmistakable brilliance. Signage above a newly renovated brick building on the corner bore gold lettering, Sarah Miller Financial Services. She was no longer just managing her own budget. She ran a thriving advisory firm with 3 full-time employees, helping hundreds of women secure their independence, protect their assets, and navigate complex legal agreements. She turned the corner and pushed open the glass door of the small cafe sitting adjacent to the Target parking lot where her journey had begun. The bell above the door chimed softly. The air inside smelled rich and comforting: roasted espresso beans, steamed oat milk, and warm cinnamon pastries. Sarah stepped up to the counter. Behind the register stood the same young cashier who had been there a year ago. "Good afternoon," the cashier said cheerfully, tapping the touch screen. "What can I get started for you today?" "A large almond milk latte, please," Sarah said, her voice smooth and clear. "That will be $5.25, the cashier replied, smiling. Sarah opened her structured leather tote bag. She pulled out a sleek, matte black debit card. Embossed across the bottom in crisp silver lettering were the words, Sarah Miller Financial Services, LLC. She slid the card into the reader. There was no delay. There was no hesitation. A soft, clean, high-pitched beep echoed through the quiet cafe. The screen flashed bright green. Approved. The paper receipt printed with a quiet whir. The cashier handed her the warm paper cup. "Here you go, ma'am. Have a wonderful evening." "Thank you," Sarah said, taking the cup. The warmth seeped through the cardboard, comforting her fingers. As she turned toward the exit, The glass door opened again. A man stepped inside, wearing a dark suit without a tie. It was Mark. He looked different. The arrogance that once defined his posture was gone. His face was leaner, his hair silvering slightly at the temples, and his eyes carried a quiet, humbled maturity after 12 months of court-ordered therapy and hard self-reflection. He held a leather briefcase in one hand. He stopped when he saw Sarah. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The espresso machine hissed softly in the background. Mark looked at the coffee cup in her hand, then at the black debit card she was slipping back into her coat pocket. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his wallet. "Sarah, let me get that for you. Please." Sarah looked at him. She saw no malice in his face, only a quiet, earnest desire to offer an olive branch. She let out a soft, warm breath and smiled, not a smile of bitterness, nor a smile of triumph, but a smile of complete, peaceful detachment. She gently tapped the warm cup in her hand. "Thank you, Mark," Sarah said softly, her tone steady and polite. "But I've got this." Mark froze. He looked at her eyes, then down at the firm name embossed on her card. He slowly nodded. The realization settled deep within him. He was no longer looking at a wife he could manage, nor a victim he could pity. He was looking at a woman who owned every inch of her life. "I know you do, Sarah," Mark whispered, his voice filled with genuine, unforced respect. He stepped aside, holding the heavy glass door open for her. "I know you do." Sarah walked past him into the crisp spring air. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, just as the sun touched the edge of the city skyline. The world around her was bathed in brilliant amber light. The breeze carried the scent of blooming cherry blossoms and fresh green grass. She took a sip of her latte. The warm cinnamon and espresso tasted rich and comforting. Sarah stood still on the corner of High Street, holding her coffee cup. She looked up at the golden sky. She thought about that $4.15 loaf of bread and carton of milk. She thought about the cold humiliation of a declined card, the hidden trap of a signed power of attorney, and the silent violence of being made to feel invisible. Those moments had once felt like an ending. Now, she understood they were simply the fire that forged her strength. Love without respect would always curdle into control. But true self-respect, grounded in knowledge, action, and courage, opened the door to eternal freedom. She had not waited for someone to save her. She had picked up the pen, stepped out of the shadows, and written her own story. Sarah smiled, a quiet, radiant smile that reached her eyes. She took a deep breath of the fresh evening air, turned toward the golden horizon, and walked forward, completely free, unburdened, proud, and fully living in her own golden hour. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below so we know we're walking this journey together. Hope to see you on the next page.